All right, Shalom. First and foremost, call Halal Yamla, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaRachakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders, a great millstone that I learned the truth from. And also peace and salutation to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And the title of this video is going to be, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh. All right. And that's coming from what the Lord told Moses, okay, our forefather Moses, all right, as whenever we were still in the land of Egypt, okay, serving captivity in the book of Exodus, all right. Here in Exodus 7, in verse 1, it says, And the Lord Yahweh said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Okay, so the Lord told Moses, all right, as the Lord was getting ready to send Moses out to go out and preach before Pharaoh, all right, as you read in the previous chapter, okay, as the Most High was promising, to Moses that he was going to deliver our people, our forefathers, the nation of Israel, out of captivity, out of Egypt, and out of the hands of Pharaoh. Okay, Exodus 6 and verse 28, it says, And it came to pass on the day when the Lord Yahweh spake unto Moses in the land of Egypt, that the Lord Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, I am the Lord Yahweh, speak thou unto Pharaoh king of Egypt all that I say unto thee. Verse 30, And Moses said before the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips, and how shall Pharaoh hearken unto me? And so basically, as the Lord was getting ready to send Moses to preach and stand before Pharaoh, Moses is basically like, look, I'm of uncircumcised lips, showing lack of confidence, lack of faith, because even as you go also in the Exodus, Moses pleaded to the Lord, telling the Lord that that he's not eloquent in speech, right? He's not fluent in speech. Okay, he stumbles over his words, right? Probably stuttered, probably stuttered a lot when he was talking. Okay. And it shows you that, Yahweh Shai doesn't, send out the best orators or the best speakers, okay, amongst his men. All right, because ultimately it's not about, being a great speaker or being, articulate with your speech and sounding like a college professor when you're out, preaching the word, doing his lessons, or out on the highways and the byways. It's just simply, okay, all about, preaching 100% truth, okay, in the correct name, the name of Yahweh Shai, and preaching it with power, power through the Spirit, preaching the word of the Lord with confidence, all right, and ultimately mixed with faith, all right, as Scripture speaks about in the book of Hebrews, all right, but and so, as we see right here in Exodus 6, verses 29 on down, the Lord was basically sending Moses to go stand before Pharaoh, okay, and, preach and prophesy to Pharaoh, all right. And then, so here again in Exodus 7, verse 1, And the Lord Yahweh said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he send the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. You see that? So in verse 1 again, it said that the Lord said unto Moses, all right, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh. See that? Okay, and ultimately, what did Moses do in Egypt? He prophesied. Okay, he represented the mouthpiece of Yahweh Shai in the land of Egypt, right, in the land of our former captivity, okay, in the face of our former oppressors, Pharaoh of ancient Egypt, those Hamites, okay, and here we are as the the nation of Israel, okay, the bulk of us, that is, all right, here we are in our final captivity here in America, which is likened to what? The modern day Egypt, pursuant to Revelation 11 verse 8, okay, being ruled over the modern day Pharaoh and the modern day Egyptians, which is who? Esau, Edom, okay, which you read in the book of Romans, the 9th chapter, verse 13 on down. Okay, the Apostle Paul likens Esau, Edom to the modern day Pharaoh, okay, and the modern day Egyptians within this spiritual Egypt, which we know is America, also known as Babylon the Great, according to end time prophecy, okay. And so the Lord, when He raised up Moses to prophesy and stand before Pharaoh, the Lord basically, made Moses a god to Pharaoh, right? A god. Okay, and even let's look up this word God. All right, this word God is Strong's H430. Alahayim. Alahayim. Okay, rulers, judges, divine ones. All right, then it also goes into angels as well. And it also goes into God, God-like one. Okay, so that's what the word Alahayim goes into. Which all of us, that are up the hopeful elect, we're all pretty much familiar with this word by now. Okay, as this same word Alahayim is also used in Genesis 1:1, where it says in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, talking about the angels, Yahweh Shai and the first fruit spirits amongst the nation of Israel, okay, the 144,000 that were with Yahweh Shai aiding in the creation, okay. But nonetheless, that's another topic for another day. But this word God in Exodus 7:1, Alahayim, okay, goes into rulers, judges, and as well God-like one. So the Lord basically raised up Moses, okay, who was a prophet, all right, as well as the leader of the nation of Israel, okay. He raised up Moses as a ruler or a judge or a God-like one before Pharaoh, okay, just simply through what? Preaching and prophesying to Pharaoh, saying what? Let our people go, or else what? Yahweh Shemashah is going to bring forth those different plagues upon Egypt, okay, to pretty much destroy your kingdom. You see that? And just as we, the hopeful elect, pretty much come with the word of Yahweh Shemashah in his outer days, okay, standing before Esau, Edom, and his modern day Egypt, America, we're basically coming with the same message that the Lord is getting ready to let His people, all right, the elect of the nation of Israel, go out of this modern day spiritual Egypt, and then what? The Lord is getting ready to bring all kinds of judgments and plagues upon this place, right? Famine, pestilence, scourges, right? Different weather effects, which we currently already see these things taking place now, all right? But all these things are going to further intensify as we, draw nigh to Jacob's trouble, okay? And ultimately, as we draw nigh, closer and closer to Yahweh Shai coming back, okay? That, and mind you, speaking of Yahweh Shai, right? Now, as you read throughout the book of Exodus, the Most High ultimately delivered the children of Israel out of Egypt, ultimately through that angel, okay? Through His angel, okay? That had power to pardon transgression, as you read of in the book of Exodus, okay? Well, guess what? As we're getting ready to, as we the hopeful elect are getting ready to go through Exodus 2.0, right, out of this modern day Egypt, America, and the Lord's getting ready to deliver us out of this modern day Egypt with the same angel, Yahweh Shai, okay, and the same angel that has the power to pardon our transgressions, okay, our high priest in the heavens, Yahweh Shai. You see that? So as it says again, Exodus 7:1, and the Lord Yahweh said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Okay, and let's get this right here. This is Sirach chapter 45 and verse 1. It says, And he brought out of him a merciful man, which found favor in the sight of all flesh, even Moses, beloved of Yahweh and men, whose memorial is blessed. Okay, verse 2. He made him like to the glorious saints, and magnified him, so that his enemies stood in fear of him. You see that? So, when those plagues were coming down upon ancient Egypt, all right, and the Lord was dealing with Moses, okay, all of our enemies in ancient Egypt, those Egyptians, ultimately stood in fear of Moses, because what? They saw that the Lord was dealing with him, right? They saw that the God of the Hebrews, right, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was dealing with our forefathers in ancient Egypt, okay, and casting down Pharaoh and the Egyptians and those different ancient Egyptian gods and deities that were worshipped in Egypt, right? He was casting down all of his magi's and his left hand priesthood that was in Egypt, okay. And Pharaoh and the Egyptians stood in fear of Moses, okay. And just like when we read in Revelation the 11th chapter, all right, around about the 11th verse, it talks about what? After 3 days and a half, all right, 350 years, from 1619 to the late 1960s, the Most High Yahweh Shema Shai would send down a spirit of life upon us, the hopeful elect. Okay, starting with Abba Bivens, down to the least of us that are of the hopeful elect. And then what? Great fear fell upon them which saw us. Great fear is upon them, right? Esau, Edom, and these heathen nations, our enemies, which see us, the hopeful elect, the remnant, the tabernacle of David, standing upon our feet in these outer days, okay, in the Holy Spirit of Yahweh Shema Shai, calling on the name of Yahweh Shema Shai, and preaching and prophesying His everlasting gospel, okay, casting down Esau, Edom, Babylon the Great, this beast system, his image, casting down the Charagma, okay, speaking the end of the rulership of these heathen nations to existence, right? And ultimately speaking the return of Yahweh Shai into existence. You see that? So just as Moses, okay, put our enemies in Egypt in great fear because of, the preaching and prophesying of the Lord of that day, well, guess what? Our enemies, all right, Esau, Edom, the modern day Egyptians, along with the rest of these heathen nations, are standing in fear of us, the hopeful elect, the remnant in these outer days. Because we're through the word of Yahweh Shema Shai, we're casting down our enemies in these outer days. Okay? And let me also get this. Let's get Wisdom of Solomon. Wisdom of Solomon 5 and verse 1, it says, "Then shall the righteous man stand in great boldness before the face of such as have afflicted him, and made no account of his labors." See that? And Moses was an example of that during his time when we were in ancient Egypt. Okay, standing in great boldness in the face of Pharaoh and those Egyptians that afflicted us, right? And made no account of our labors. But now we, the hopeful elect, are doing that in these outer days, in this modern day Egypt, right? It says, verse 2, "And when they see it," okay, when our enemies see us standing upon our feet, right, through the Holy Spirit and the power of Yahweh Shema Shai, it says, "They shall be troubled with terrible fear." Okay, great fear fell upon them which saw them. Okay, Revelation the 11th chapter, right? It says, "When they see it, they shall be troubled with terrible fear, and shall be amazed at the strangeness of his salvation, so far beyond all that they look for." Yeah, and these heathen are really going to be in great fear when the strangeness of our salvation appears, which is what? Okay, that angel of the Lord, Yahweh Shai, to deliver us, the hopeful elect, out of this modern day spiritual Egypt, America, as well as wherever else the elect are scattered at throughout the four corners of the earth. Okay, Yahweh Shai coming back to deliver us in the strangeness of our salvation via what? The holy angels, via the chariots. Okay, what Esau calls so-called UFOs, but according to the scriptures, they're known as in the book of Kings. Okay, the chariots of Israel. All right, and as well in the book of Habakkuk, the third chapter, the chariots are also known as the chariots of salvation. Okay, showing you that the chariots are only going to come back to deliver Israelites. Okay, the elect of the nation of Israel. No heathen nations, and especially no Edomites. All right. But yeah, as I said again, Exodus 7 in verse 1, it says, And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. You see that? And so we, the hopeful elect in these outer days, in this modern day Egypt, The Lord is making us gods, okay, in the face of our enemies, in the face of Esau, Edom. Okay, the Lord is raising us up to be judges and rulers and ultimately divine ones. Okay, gods on the earth. And ultimately we're gonna fully be brought to our godlike state when Yahushua comes back, all right, and give us a new bodies and enter us into the new covenant, right? And in those new bodies, we're going to come down from the chariot of Yahushua from the heavens, okay, and establish the kingdom of heaven, all right? Gather up the heathen nations, starting with their elites and their kings and their nobles, right? We're going to be grabbing them up out of those bunkers, okay? They're underground bunkers, all right, and they're going to be the first fruits of our slaves in the kingdom, okay? Where we're going to rule over these heathen nations with a rod of iron via the laws and the commandments, okay? That's what it's all getting ready to lead to when Yahushua comes back, all right? But here in these latter days, all right, in these last days of prophecy, the Lord is raising up us, the hopeful elect, to be likened to gods on the earth, in the face of our enemies and those that afflict us, right? Starting with Esau, Edom, starting with his elites. Okay? Let's get this. Salakia. Let's get Jeremiah, the first chapter. Jeremiah 1, and I'm going to start at verse 4. It says, Then the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto me, saying, Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Okay, and this is the Lord, as it says, at the subheading at the top, Jeremiah's call and commission. Okay, so this is the Lord getting ready to send the prophet Jeremiah out to go out and prophesy. Okay, Jeremiah 1 and 5 again. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Okay, basically, ultimately showing what that the prophet Jeremiah, along with the rest of the prophets of the scriptures, okay, the men of the Lord, were ultimately predestined, all right, and preordained before the foundation of the heaven and the earth, okay, to to preach and prophesy and do the will of the Lord throughout the earth, okay, throughout their respective times, even all the way up to this very day, okay. As the scripture speaks about how the Lord would raise up the prophets in the days of old, right? And it says, verse 6, Then said I, Lord Yahweh, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child. Okay? And pretty much, the reason why Jeremiah responded like this was because, when you go into certain history, most Bible scholars agree that the prophet Jeremiah was a very young man at this particular time when the Lord, sent him out to go out and prophesy. Most Bible scholars agree that Jeremiah was anywhere from, a late teen to his early 20s at the time when the Lord sent him out to go prophesy. Okay, so Jeremiah was like, basically, look, I'm too young to go out and speak. I'm too young to go out and prophesy. I'm just a child. Okay, and basically it's similar to how Moses reacted when the Most High was getting ready to send Moses out to go on speech. As we read in Exodus 6, Moses was like, "Look, I'm of uncircumcised lips," meaning what? I'm not a good speaker. I'm not eloquent. I'm not fluent. Okay, ain't no way in hell Pharaoh is gonna listen to me preaching and prophesying to him. Let my people go. Okay, the prophet Jeremiah right here, it pretty much has a similar reaction. Saying, look, I'm too young to go out and prophesy and speak. Okay, I'm not a good speaker. I'm not eloquent. Okay, I'm not ready for this. All right, but it says, Jeremiah 1 verse 7, But the Lord Yahweh said unto me, Say not, I am a child, for thou shalt go to all that I shall send thee, and whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak. So the Lord wasn't having it. It's like, look, I don't care about you being a young man, okay? Whether it be your late teens or early 20s, whatnot. I don't care about if you're a fluent or eloquent speaker or not. Just go out and prophesy and do what I tell you. You see that? Showing you how much, Yahweh Shema Shai is, deadly serious about, his word being preached throughout the earth. The Lord doesn't care if you're a young man, all right, in your prime, middle age, or even an old man. Okay, when the Lord, when Yahweh Shema Shai, has it ordained for you to go out and eventually teach his word and prophesy, and especially prophesy before kings or rulers or wicked rulers, wicked oppressors. Okay, the Lord wants you to do it. That's your duty, right? And it says, Jeremiah 1 verse 7 again, but the Lord Yahweh said unto me, say not, I am a child, for thou shalt go to all that I shall send thee, and whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak. Be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord Yahweh. See that? So he's giving Jeremiah, words of encouragement, words of, confidence. Like, look, don't be afraid of their faces, because regardless, I'm with you to deliver you. Okay, even if they try to attack you, persecute you, try to put you to death, it's like, look, I'm with you. Okay, so don't be afraid of their faces. Don't be afraid of their looks. Don't be afraid of their words. Don't be afraid of them whatsoever. You see that? And that's the same spirit that the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai has instilled to us, the hopeful elect, the men of the Lord, in these outer days. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why we go out on the highways and the byways so consistently, fervently. All right, in season, out of season, right? Making our bodies living sacrifice. Okay, not having any fear of somebody attacking us, pulling a weapon on us. Okay, even getting arrested, right? Because what? Because the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai told us to go out in the highways and the byways and do his work. Okay, preach his gospel, preach his word. All right, and speak the end of Esau, Edom, and these heathen nations in their wicked rulerships into existence. Okay, even all the way to the death. Okay, for those of us that's written in the story to ultimately be martyrs for the word of Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, so Jeremiah 1 verse 8 again, be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord Yahweh. You see that? Because it's ultimately coming to a time where, all enemies of this truth, okay, Esau, Edom, the heathen nations, and even including 2/3 of our people, right? The scoffers, the mockers, okay, it's getting ready to come to a time where they're going to be afraid of our faces. You see that? Because right now, throughout social media and throughout TikTok and whatnot, you got many of our people, especially, these so-called black Christians, okay, doing all these little videos and these skits and whatnot, okay, these, so-called black women, right, doing all these little TikTok videos, speaking out against this Hebrew Israelite ministry, mocking us, scoffing us, coming up against the doctrine, coming up against the whole entire ministry as a whole, right, with no fear whatsoever. But hey, very soon, okay, sooner than we believe, okay, all that scoffing and mocking and gainsaying and playing is all going to flip upon their heads, okay, and all the scoffers and the mockers amongst our people, the 2/3 that's talking all kinds of crap against this Hebrew Israelite ministry, they're the ones that's going to be afraid of our faces. You see that? And when these prophecies and these judgments come to pass in Jacob's trouble, okay, that's when these same scoffers and mockers amongst our people are going to be seeking the Lord early, as it speaks of in Proverbs, the 1st chapter. All right, but that's when the Lord's going to reject them. You see that? And scoff and laugh at their calamity. Just as the 2/3 of our people are scoffing and laughing at us right now. Okay, well, guess what? Yahweh Shema Shai through his men are going to have the last laugh when it's all said and done. All right? So it says again, Jeremiah 1 verse 8, be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord Yahweh. Okay? Because again, very soon as all enemies of this gospel, all enemies of this truth are getting ready to the Lord's going to put a spirit on them to be afraid of our faces, especially when all the things that we, the hopeful elect, the men of the Lord, starting with the apostles and the bishops and the elders of Great Millstone, down to the least of us that are of the hopeful elect, right? When all these judgments and end time prophecies come to pass, all right, Jacob's trouble, martial law, lockdowns, blackouts, okay, Esau coming with great wrath, the charagma, and the NWO agenda being established, okay. When all the words that we speak according to the scriptures, all right, in the Holy Spirit of Yahweh Shema Shai come to pass, all right, all enemies of this truth are going to be afraid of us. You see that? They're going to fear us because they're going to see that Yahweh Shema Shai is dealing with us, just as the Lord was dealing with Moses in ancient Egypt. Okay, it made Moses a god before Pharaoh, as we read earlier, right? Well, hey, guess what? The Lord's getting ready to make his men, his elect, right, gods on the earth. Okay, and it says, Jeremiah 1 verse 9, then the Lord Yahweh put forth his hand and touched my mouth. And the Lord Yahweh said unto me, behold, I have put my words in thy mouth. All right, verse 10. See, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out and to pull down and to destroy and to throw down and to build and plant. All right, let's read that again. Jeremiah 1 verse 10. See, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms. See that? Because all throughout the scriptures, okay, anytime the Lord would always set up his prophets, okay, prophets would always be over kings and over rulers and judges and magistrates. All right, the prophets literally have a national pastime according to the scriptures for cursing out wicked kings, wicked rulers. Okay, even amongst the wicked kings and rulers amongst our forefathers. All right, and really, as pretty much as you read it throughout the book of Jeremiah, okay, the Lord, primarily sent him out to curse out the wicked rulers and kings amongst our forefathers during his time. Zedekiah, right? King Zedekiah of Judah, who was the last king, all right, over Judah. Eventually before the Babylonians came and sacked the temple, right, and brought us into captivity in ancient Babylon, right? Jeremiah was cursing out the wicked kings and rulers amongst our people during this time. He was cursing out the wicked priests that were doing wickedness in the temple at this time, right? And overall cursing out the wickedness that was going on amongst our forefathers during this time, okay, especially primarily of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. As by this time the northern kingdom had pretty much already left. All right, they were carried captivity into ancient Assyria, and then eventually they came over here to the west. So by the time Jeremiah came on the scene, it was primarily Judah, Benjamin, and Levi that were in the Holy Land. Okay, collectively called the Jews, right? So all throughout the scriptures, when you read about the prophets and the men of the Lord, they all during their respective times cursed out wicked kings and wicked rulers of their times. Elijah cursed out King Ahab, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, even the prophet Nathan, when the Lord wanted to curse out King David for murdering Uriah the Hittite, okay, and sleeping with his wife, Bathsheba, if I'm not mistaken. You correct me if I'm wrong, but the Lord sent the prophet Nathan to pretty much curse David out, okay, and tell him his sin to his face, right? And then as well, even fast forward, okay, you read about the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, okay. They all cursed out the wicked kings and wicked rulers of their respective times, right? And then even when John the Baptist, okay, who is Elijah in the reincarnation, right? Even Yahweh Shai let us know that John the Baptist was Elijah in reincarnation, right? But even John the Baptist, he cursed out a wicked king during his time. I believe Herod the second, if I'm not mistaken. For marrying his brother's wife, if I'm not mistaken, when you go into the Gospels. Okay? So all the prophets and the men of the Lord cursed out wicked kings and rulers of their respective times. So guess what? As the Lord has raised up his prophets and his apostles and his men all over again in these outer days, starting with the apostles and the bishops and the elders of the great millstone, down to the least of us of the hopeful elect, as well as the men that labor before them, going back to Abba Bivens, who was the prophet Elijah in reincarnation in these latter days, right? Abba Bivens. Hey, guess what? We're set up in these latter days to curse out the wicked kings and rulers of this day. The elites of Esau, Edom, all right, and those that rub elbows with them, all right, these wicked leaders of these different countries, right, especially here in Babylon the Great, these wicked presidents, all right, and hey, we even get on the wicked rulers and the wicked leaders amongst our people, from these black preachers in these churches to these so-called black politicians, and even these wicked Israelite leaders of these wayward camps, teaching these false doctrines, going off, switching up the doctrine in these other days. That's literally a national pastime, all right, amongst the prophets and the men of the Lord, according to the scriptures. All right, and as it says again, Jeremiah 1 verse 10, see, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out and to pull down and to destroy and throw down. And as it speaks of in 2 Corinthians the 10th chapter, we cast down the strongholds of this world, through the spirit and power and the word of Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, and it says, and to build and plant. So at the same time as the prophets in these latter days are pulling down and casting down the strongholds and the kingdoms of this world, simply through the word of Yahweh Shema Shai, preaching the word, right? Or by this same method, through preaching the word of Yahweh Shema Shai, we're also building up a kingdom and planting, a righteous root of Yahweh Shema Shai, which is what? The house of David, the tabernacle of David, which is going to serve as the governing body under Yahweh Shai in the kingdom of heaven, all right? And we're ultimately building up the elect of the nation of Israel, the 1/3, and planting the elect as a righteous, righteous seed, a righteous tree, all right, a righteous vineyard in the eyes of Yahweh Shema Shai in his outer days. You see that? So this word that we preach is literally doing a dual task, pulling down, all right, and rooting out and casting down the strongholds of this world, the rulership of Esau, Edom, and this beast system, and the rest of these heathen nations. And at the same time, by the same word that we preach, we're also building up the Lord's kingdom, the Lord's house, the house of David, tabernacle of David, and as well the rest of the elect 1/3 of the nation of Israel, right? Lord will not be of their number. So just simply, the power that we have with this word, the word of Yahweh Shema Shai, and that's making us like into gods on the earth, right? This word is literally doing a dual task. It's pulling down and as well as building up. Hey, that's spiritual power in itself right there. God-like power. You see? And also I want to get this. This is Revelation chapter 11 and verse 3. It says, and I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. And ultimately the 2 witnesses is speaking of what? The elect amongst the northern and southern kingdom. The tabernacle of David. All right, the prophets and the men of the Lord. The tabernacle of David. Northern and southern kingdoms of the nation of Israel represents these 2 witnesses that we're reading of right here. And what does a witness have? A testimony. And who amongst our people have the testimony of Yahweh Shai, which is the spirit of prophecy in his outer days? All right, us the hopeful elect, the men of the Lord. That are standing upon our feet and prophesying. It says, verse 4, these are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the power of the earth, before Yahweh Shema Shai. These are the 2 olive trees. The nation of Israel, all right, northern and southern kingdom are likened to olive trees, right? Which is why when you read in Romans the 11th chapter, where the apostle Paul, goes into the wild olive tree being grafted in. The wild olive tree, basically represents what? Israelite foreigners, Israelites. All right, at that time they were raised up in a Gentile Hellenized, state of mind. Raised up, not keeping the laws and the commandments in the high holy days of the scriptures. Raised up worshiping the idols and the customs of the heathen nations, right? But Israel's like into an olive tree, and a wild olive tree that you read of in Romans the 11th chapter, which is simply Israelites. They were raised up, in a heathen or Gentile mindset, raised up worshiping the idols in the religions and the customs of the heathen nations. You see that? But it says, Revelation 11 verse 5, and if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devour their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. Verse 6, these have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. You see that? And and that ultimately goes into what? Spiritual power being given to the men of the Lord, the prophets, which starts off with the preaching of the word, because even just as the Lord gave the power to Moses to stand before Pharaoh and preach and prophesy before Pharaoh, and speak those plagues into existence, right? Well, guess what? We, the hopeful elect, we've received that same power in these outer days, in the face of this modern day Pharaoh, Esau, Edom, within this modern day Egypt. And as it said in verse 5 again, and if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devour their enemies. Hey, and that's speaking to spiritual power. Yahweh Shema Shah is literally going to give brothers the power to do exactly what we were reading of right here. Literally shooting fire out of their mouth, right? Giving brothers spiritual power, telekinesis and things like that. Because ultimately, as Esau's getting ready to come down great wrath, all right, using AI and robot dogs and robot police, drones and mass surveillance, and weapons that have never been seen before. We, the hopeful elected men of the Lord, we're literally going to need this type of power. We're literally going to need Yahweh Shema Shai to give us this type of power that we're reading of right here, to to endure through these times and ultimately endure to the end. And we know as well that one of the ways that the Lord is going to give his men this type of power is to the angels and the archangel Michael, pursuant to Daniel 12 and 1. All right, but the Lord's also ultimately going to have to perform divine intervention for his elect. And part of that divine intervention that is, as we're reading right here, is spiritual power. It says, and if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. Verse 6, these have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with plagues as often as they will. And any type of person on the earth that's able to do this, that person is literally a god on the earth. And this type of power the Lord is going to give to his prophets and his men, all right, in these outer days, to make his men gods on the earth, before our oppressors, before our enemies, just as the Lord gave this type of power to Moses in ancient Egypt. All right. So this all speaks to how the Lord is going to let's get 2nd Ezra 16. All right, 2nd Ezra 16. And let's go to verse 70. 2nd Ezra 16 verse 70. It says, for there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord. And the word insurrection means a violent uprising. So there's getting ready to be a great insurrection upon those of us that fear Yahweh Shema Shai, the elect, the men of the Lord. Especially those of us that are preaching his word. It's going to be mass persecution everywhere. Right? Esau's going to be using AI and mass surveillance to try to track down the men of the Lord. Okay, those of us that have this testimony, right? And it says, verse 71, they shall be like mad men, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear the Lord. Okay, because we ultimately know, according to end time prophecy, that some of us, as Yahweh said in Revelation 2 and 10, some of us are going to be cast into prison and go through tribulation. All right. And also, pursuant to Revelation the 20th chapter, we know that some of us are ultimately going to have to be beheaded for the word of Yahweh Bashmal Shai's sake. But then again, that's just it. Only some of us. Okay, not half of us, not the majority of us, and damn sure not all of us. Okay, the Lord's not going to allow Esau, Edom, and these heathen and all of our enemies to have their way with all of us that are of the hopeful elect. Okay, but we know the Lord is going to allow them to get some of us. Okay, some of us, for the purpose of what? Making some of the elect martyrs. Okay, and be faithful unto death. But it says, verse 72, for they shall waste and take away their goods and cast them out of their houses. Verse 73, then shall they be known who are my chosen, and they shall be tried as the gold and the fire. See that? So when Esau Edom makes his move, all right, and comes down with great wrath and persecution against his elect, his men, the men of the Lord will not be able to number. Shortly after that, Yahweh Bashmal Shah is going to make known who are his chosen. He's going to make known who are his elect. Okay, he's going to make known that his men are gods on the earth. Okay, through what? Divine intervention. Okay, sending down Michael and the holy angels to protect the elect during these times. Right, even giving certain brothers spiritual powers, as we read in Revelation the 11th chapter. All right, but before it's all said and done, the Lord is going to make known who are his chosen. He's going to make known that his prophets and his men are gods on the earth. Okay, that the Lord is dealing with us. The Lord will not be able to number. All right. So, matter of fact, let me just end it off on this. This is Zephaniah 3 and verse 18. It says, this is the Lord speaking. He says, I will gather them that are sorrowful for the solemn assembly. Okay, and that's talking about us, the hopeful elect, being gathered to the solemn assembly, which is what? This Hebrew Israelite ministry. Okay, this household of faith. All right. It says, who are of thee, to whom the reproach of it was a burden. Right, verse 19. Behold, at that time I will undo all that afflict thee. Okay, and the Lord's going to cast down our enemies, starting with Esau, Edom, cast down Babylon the Great, cast down his beast system and his image and his mark. All right, as the Lord is raising up and gathering his elect by the word, the Lord is also tearing down and tearing down and casting down our enemies. Right, it says, and I will save her that halted, and gather her that was driven out. And I will get them praise and fame in every land where they have been put to shame. See that? The Lord's going to give his men, his elect, praise and fame in every land where we've been put to shame. Especially starting here in Babylon the Great America. The Lord's going to make it known that his prophets and his men are gods on the earth. Okay? So, so with that, Lord willing, this video is edifying. And until next time, Shalom.